Everyone held their breath when Staff Sergeant Maria Johnson walked into that briefing room, not knowing she would change everything about how the Air Force treats its own. What happened next would shock everyone. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Maria straightened her uniform one last time. 3 years at Lackland Air Force Base, and she still felt like an outsider looking in. The cafeteria conversations that stopped when she approached. The training exercises where she was consistently paired with the weakest performers. The promotions that somehow always went to someone else, despite her perfect scores. Just another day in paradise, she whispered to herself, but her voice carried a tremor she couldn't hide anymore. The morning briefing was routine until Colonel Patterson announced the new squadron assignments. Maria watched as her male counterparts exchanged knowing glances, their smirks barely concealed. She had submitted her request for the elite reconnaissance unit 6 months ago. Her test scores were flawless, her physical fitness ratings exceeded requirements, and her psychological evaluations were exemplary. "Johnson, you'll be remaining in logistics support," Patterson announced without looking up from his papers. The room fell silent. Even the men who had been whispering moments before seemed stunned by the casual dismissal of someone so clearly qualified. But what Maria did next changed everything. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the concrete floor. Every eye in the room turned toward her. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure everyone could hear it, but her voice came out steady and clear. "Sir, with all due respect, I need to understand the criteria used for these assignments." Colonel Patterson finally looked up, his gray eyes narrowing. "Excuse me, Sergeant, my qualifications exceed those of the personnel selected for reconnaissance. I'm requesting clarification on the selection process." The tension in the room was suffocating. Some of her fellow airmen looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. Others wore expressions of barely contained hostility. But Maria noticed something else. A few faces showed what looked like respect. "Sergeant Johnson, you'll discuss this matter privately if you have concerns." "No, sir. I believe this discussion benefits everyone here. Transparency in promotion and assignment processes protects all personnel." What happened in the next 60 seconds would become legendary throughout the base. But first you need to understand what led Maria to this breaking point. 3 months earlier, Maria had discovered something that made her stomach turn. While working late in the communications center, she accidentally accessed a folder containing personnel evaluation comments. What she saw there changed everything she thought she knew about her situation. Comments like "difficult to work with" and "not a team player" appeared consistently in her file, despite glowing reviews from her direct supervisors. Someone had been systematically sabotaging her career, and she was determined to find out who. The investigation she conducted in secret would have impressed any detective. Using her security clearance and technical skills, Maria began tracking the digital fingerprints of her personnel file modifications. What she discovered was a network of discrimination that went far beyond her individual case. 7 other women, all minorities, had similar patterns in their files: modified evaluations, delayed promotions, and mysterious negative comments that contradicted their actual performance reviews. Someone was running a systematic campaign to keep certain people from advancing, but the identity of the person behind it all would shock even Maria. The digital trail led to Captain Richard Morrison, the base's equal opportunity officer, the very person supposed to prevent discrimination. The irony was so bitter it made Maria's hands shake as she printed the evidence. Morrison had been using his position to access and modify personnel files, creating a paper trail that justified keeping women and minorities in lower positions. But Morrison wasn't working alone. The network included 3 senior NCOs and a lieutenant colonel. They had been operating for over 2 years, affecting dozens of careers while presenting themselves as model officers to their superiors. Maria realized she was holding enough evidence to destroy careers and possibly send people to prison. The question was, what should she do with it? The smart move would have been to go through official channels, submit her findings to the Inspector General, and wait for the system to work. But Maria had learned not to trust the system. Too many times she had seen complaints disappear into bureaucratic black holes while the perpetrators continued their behavior. That's when she made the decision that would define her entire military career. Instead of going to the IG, Maria decided to confront the network directly. She would give them a chance to come clean and make things right before she destroyed their lives the way they had tried to destroy hers and others. Her first stop was Captain Morrison's office. She walked in during his lunch break, closing the door behind her. Morrison looked up from his sandwich, annoyed at the interruption. "What can I do for you, Johnson?" Maria placed a thick folder on his desk. "You can explain these." Morrison opened the folder and his face went white as he recognized the printouts of file modifications, the correspondence between conspirators, and the statistical analysis showing the clear pattern of discrimination. "Where did you get these?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Does it matter? The question is what you're going to do about it." Morrison stared at the evidence for a long moment, then looked up at Maria with something that might have been respect mixed with fear. "What do you want?" "Justice. For me, for the other women you've targeted, and for everyone who comes after us." What Morrison said next surprised even Maria. "You're right," he said quietly. "We've been wrong. All of us." Maria had expected denials, threats, maybe even violence. She hadn't expected a confession. "I got caught up in something that started small and grew into this monster. It began with just trying to help a friend get a promotion, and somehow it became this systematic thing. I know that doesn't excuse it, but I want you to know it wasn't supposed to target you specifically, but it did target me specifically. Me and 7 other women whose only crime was being good at our jobs while not being white males." Morrison nodded slowly. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to fix every file you've tampered with. I want the other conspirators to face consequences. And I want systems in place so this never happens again. And if I refuse..." Maria smiled grimly. "Then tomorrow morning copies of this folder go to the Inspector General, the base commander, the Pentagon, and every major news outlet in the country. Your choice." The next 48 hours would test everything Maria believed about justice and redemption. To her surprise, Morrison kept his word. Within 24 hours he had confessed to his superiors, and begun the process of correcting the modified files. The other conspirators were identified and faced disciplinary action ranging from demotion to court-martial. But the real test came when Colonel Patterson called Maria into his office for what she assumed would be retaliation for her public confrontation in the briefing room. "Sergeant Johnson, sit down." Maria remained standing. "Sir, if this is about the briefing room incident, I stand by my actions." "It's not about that." "Well, not exactly." Patterson gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." Reluctantly, Maria sat down, but remained at attention. "I owe you an apology," Patterson said, his voice heavy with what sounded like genuine regret. "I had no idea about the systematic discrimination you and others were facing. Captain Morrison's confession has opened my eyes to failures in leadership that I should have caught years ago." Maria said nothing, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Your personnel file has been corrected. Your qualifications for the reconnaissance unit are indeed exemplary, and if you're still interested, the position is yours." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. After 3 years of fighting for recognition, advancement was being offered just like that. But something felt wrong about it. "Sir, what about the other women who were affected? They're all being offered appropriate positions and promotions based on their actual qualifications. We're also implementing new oversight systems to prevent this from happening again." Maria nodded slowly. "And Captain Morrison, he's facing court-martial, but his cooperation in correcting these injustices will be taken into consideration." The conversation that followed would reshape how Maria viewed justice, forgiveness, and her own role in the military. "Sir, I'd like to speak on Captain Morrison's behalf at his court-martial." Patterson looked stunned. "Sergeant, this man systematically sabotaged your career. Why would you want to help him?" "Because he chose to do the right thing when it mattered most. He could have destroyed the evidence, transferred me to another base, or made my life even more difficult. Instead, he owned up to his mistakes and fixed them. That doesn't undo the harm he caused." "No, it doesn't, but it shows he's capable of change. Isn't that what we want from people who make mistakes?" Patterson leaned back in his chair. studying Maria with new interest. "You're a remarkable person, Sergeant Johnson. Most people in your position would want maximum punishment for their tormentors. Maximum punishment doesn't always create maximum justice, sir." The court-martial proceedings would test Maria's commitment to this philosophy. 3 weeks later, Maria found herself in a military courtroom, sworn in as a witness in Captain Morrison's court-martial. The prosecution had painted Morrison as a calculating discriminator who had systematically denied opportunities to qualified personnel based on race and gender. When Maria was called to testify, the prosecutor expected her to provide the final nail in Morrison's coffin. Instead, she surprised everyone in the courtroom. "Captain Morrison's actions were wrong and caused real harm to real people," she began. "But I've seen something in the past weeks that gives me hope for his redemption." She testified about Morrison's immediate confession, his cooperation in identifying other conspirators, and his genuine efforts to make amends. She spoke about restorative justice and the importance of giving people opportunities to make things right. The defense attorney looked stunned by this unexpected support from the primary victim. The prosecutor appeared frustrated that their star witness was undermining their case. But the most shocked person in the courtroom was Morrison himself. During a recess, Morrison approached Maria in the hallway. His eyes were red-rimmed and his voice shaky. "Why are you doing this for me? I destroyed your career prospects for 2 years, because I believe people can change, and you've proven that by changing, but also because this isn't just about punishment, it's about preventing this from happening to other people. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't about what you deserve, it's about what kind of person I choose to be and what kind of Air Force we want to build together." The verdict would surprise everyone, and set a precedent for how the military handles discrimination cases. The court found Morrison guilty of dereliction of duty and conduct unbecoming an officer, but sentenced him to reduction in rank, forfeiture of pay, and a reprimand rather than dismissal from service. The judge cited Maria's testimony about Morrison's cooperation and genuine remorse as factors in the relatively lenient sentence. More importantly, Morrison was assigned to work with the Inspector General's office in developing new systems to prevent discrimination and ensure fair treatment of all personnel. The other conspirators received harsher sentences, reflecting their lack of cooperation and continued denial of wrongdoing. But the real victory came 6 months later. Maria was promoted to technical sergeant ahead of schedule, and her work with the reconnaissance unit earned commendations from senior officers. More significantly, the base implemented new oversight systems that made discrimination much harder to hide, and much easier to report. 7 other women received promotions and assignments they had been unfairly denied. The base's Equal Opportunity Office was restructured with new leadership and additional oversight. But perhaps most importantly, the culture began to change. Stories of Maria's courage in confronting discrimination and her grace in showing mercy spread throughout the base and beyond. Young airmen, particularly women and minorities, found new inspiration in her example. The changes weren't just local. The Air Force adopted many of the reforms first implemented at Lackland, creating system-wide improvements in how discrimination cases are handled and prevented. 2 years later, Maria received an unexpected visitor. Captain Morrison, now working as a civilian contractor with the IG's office, knocked on Maria's office door. She looked up from her computer, surprised to see him. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all. Come in, sit down." Morrison took a seat across from her desk, looking nervous. "I wanted to thank you again for what you did at my court-martial, but more than that, I wanted to show you something." He handed her a thick report titled, "Discrimination Prevention and Response, Lessons Learned and Best Practices." This is the culmination of 2 years of work studying discrimination in the military and developing better systems to prevent it. It's being implemented across all service branches. Maria flipped through the report, impressed by its thoroughness and practical approach. "This is incredible work. You should be proud of what you've accomplished. I couldn't have accomplished it without your example of how to turn a negative situation into positive change. You taught me that justice isn't just about punishment, it's about making things better for everyone." The conversation that followed would cement a friendship that neither had expected. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," Morrison continued, "about how I got caught up in a system that was wrong, and how easy it was to rationalize harmful behavior when it benefited people I like. It's human nature to want to help our friends," Maria replied. "The problem comes when helping friends means hurting other people." Exactly, and that's what this report addresses: how to create systems that promote fairness without requiring people to be perfect moral actors all the time. Maria nodded. "Systems that make it harder to do the wrong thing, and easier to do the right thing." Yes. And systems that catch problems early, before they become systematic discrimination. They talked for over an hour about the changes they had seen, the work still to be done, and the importance of maintaining vigilance against discrimination. When Morrison finally left, Maria felt something she hadn't expected: hope that real change was possible. But the most profound validation of that change was yet to come. 5 years after the confrontation in the briefing room, Maria was promoted to Master Sergeant and transferred to the Pentagon to work on Air Force-wide personnel policies. On her first day in the new position, she was briefed on discrimination complaint statistics. The numbers were striking. Reports of discrimination had increased significantly, but investigations consistently found less evidence of actual systematic discrimination. The explanation was simple: the improved reporting systems made it safer for people to come forward with concerns, while the prevention systems made actual discrimination much rarer. More importantly, the military had developed a culture where discrimination was not just against regulations, but socially unacceptable among personnel. Young officers and NCOs actively worked to prevent discrimination rather than simply avoiding it themselves. The briefing officer noted that the changes had been inspired by what was now known as the Johnson model of addressing discrimination, confronting it directly, demanding accountability, but also providing paths for redemption and positive change. Maria smiled at hearing her name associated with these improvements, but she knew the real victory was in the statistics showing fewer people suffering the discrimination she had experienced. That evening, she called her mother to share the news of her promotion and new assignment. "I'm so proud of you, baby," her mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just for the promotion, but for how you handled that whole situation. You turned something that could have destroyed you into something that helped thousands of other people." "I had good teachers," Maria replied, thinking of her mother's lessons about standing up for what's right, while treating everyone with dignity. "What's next for you?" "More of the same, I hope. Working to make sure the military is a place where everyone can succeed based on their abilities and dedication." "And what about that Captain Morrison? Do you still keep in touch?" Maria smiled. "He's doing good work. We all make mistakes, Mama. The important thing is what we do after we make them." The conversation reminded Maria of how far she had come, not just professionally but personally. The angry, frustrated sergeant who had stood up in that briefing room had grown into a leader who understood that real change requires both courage to confront problems and wisdom to build solutions that last. The next morning brought news that would test everything Maria had learned about leadership and change. A young airman named Patricia Williams came to Maria's office with a familiar story: consistent negative evaluations despite strong performance, assignments below her qualifications, and a pattern of exclusion from opportunities given to her male peers. But this time there was a difference. Williams had documentation, witnesses, and a clear understanding of her rights and the processes available to address discrimination. More importantly, she had confidence that the system would take her complaints seriously and address them fairly. As Maria listened to Williams' story and reviewed her evidence, she realized this was the real test of the changes they had implemented. Could the new systems prevent discrimination from becoming systematic? Could they address problems before they destroyed careers and lives? The investigation that followed proved that the answer was yes. Within 2 weeks, the investigation confirmed Williams' complaints and identified the source. a senior NCO who was using outdated methods and attitudes, despite the new training and oversight systems. But unlike Maria's experience, this discrimination was caught early, addressed quickly, and resolved fairly. The senior NCO received counseling, additional training, and close supervision. Williams received appropriate assignments and evaluations. Most importantly, the incident was used as a teaching tool to improve training and prevent similar situations. As Maria watched this process unfold, she felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond personal vindication. The system was working the way it should, protecting people and correcting problems before they caused lasting harm. But the greatest satisfaction came from an unexpected source. Captain Morrison, now working as a civilian expert on military discrimination prevention, called Maria to discuss the Williams case and its implications for continued improvement. "This is exactly what we hoped would happen," he said. "Early detection, quick response, fair resolution, and systematic learning to prevent recurrence. It's gratifying to see it work, Maria, but it also shows how much vigilance is required to maintain these improvements. That's why your example is so important. You showed that it's possible to confront discrimination while still believing in people's capacity for change." Maria thought about that conversation for days afterward. The young sergeant who had stood up in that briefing room had been angry and frustrated, focused on the injustice she was experiencing. The leader she had become understood that sustainable change required both confronting problems and building solutions that addressed their root causes. The final validation of her approach came 1 year later. The Air Force Chief of Staff presented Maria with the Meritorious Service Medal for her work in developing and implementing discrimination prevention systems across the service. But more meaningful than the medal was the citation, which specifically noted her exceptional ability to transform conflict into positive change, and to build bridges while maintaining accountability. During the award ceremony, the Chief of Staff spoke about the importance of leaders who could both confront problems courageously and solve them wisely. He held up Maria's example as a model for all military leaders. After the ceremony, Maria was approached by dozens of young airmen, particularly women and minorities, who thanked her for opening doors and creating opportunities they might not have had otherwise. But the conversation that meant the most came from an unexpected source. A young white male lieutenant approached Maria hesitantly after most of the crowd had dispersed. "Master Sergeant Johnson, I wanted to thank you for what you did." "Thank me. How did my work help you?" "By creating a fairer system that recognizes merit over connection. I got promoted last month based on my actual performance, not because someone wanted to help me or hurt someone else. That means my achievements are real, and I can be proud of them." Maria realized that this young officer had identified something she hadn't fully considered, that discrimination doesn't just harm its direct victim, it also cheapens achievements by creating questions about whether they were earned fairly. "A fair system benefits everyone," she replied. "When people succeed because of their abilities and efforts, everyone can take pride in their accomplishment." As Maria reflected on her journey from frustrated sergeant to decorated leader, she understood that the real victory wasn't her personal success, but the creation of systems and culture that would protect and promote fairness for future generations of military personnel. The story that began with one woman's courage to stand up in a briefing room had become a transformation that touched thousands of lives and would continue to influence the military for years to come. But perhaps most importantly, it proved that individuals can create lasting change when they combine courage with wisdom, confrontation with compassion, and justice with mercy. Standing in the Pentagon parking lot after the award ceremony, looking up at the American flag flying overhead, Master Sergeant Maria Johnson smiled, knowing that she had helped make that flag represent what it was always supposed to represent: might, opportunity, and justice for all.
As I finish Maria's story, I'm reminded that the most powerful force in the world isn't weapons or authority, it's one person with the courage to say enough is enough. Maria could have stayed silent, she could have accepted the unfairness, and focused on surviving rather than thriving. Instead, she chose to fight not just for herself but for everyone who would come after her. That's what real heroes do. They don't just save themselves, they save others. If this story moved you, if it made you believe that one person really can make a difference, then do something with that feeling. Like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories that prove ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things. Most importantly, look for the Maria in your own life. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's time for you to stand up in your own briefing room, whatever that looks like. Drop a comment and tell me what's one injustice you wish someone would have the courage to confront. Your story might inspire the next person to take action. Thank you for listening, and remember, courage is contagious.